Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode here on the Matt Listalia Show with me, your host, Matthew, as you should expect by this point. And so for those of you that are returning and that are here watching the video, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate you coming back each and every week, and I appreciate that I continue to see people returning. You know, people coming, subscribing, and really wanting to become regular participants and members within this show, because that's where we make the difference. All of these lessons and things that we discuss here on this show are they build on each other, right? None of them, no skill or technique when it comes to mental health, mental agility, when it comes to resilience, none of these things work terribly well in a vacuum. Now, you can take an individualized skill, you can take an individualized tactic, one singular tactic, and apply that, and you'll probably see some results. You'll probably see, a little bit of shift and some positive gains there, and gains with a Z. Not those gains, but you could see some real change in your life, and that's good. But the thing is, it's when you start making kind of structural adjustments to your life, that's where the big changes happen. And all of that to say, like, no big change in your life and no shift from where you are to where you want to be occurs with like overnight. Obviously, if you could change your life overnight, then no one's life would not be where they wanted it to be. It takes time, it takes effort, and there's an aspect to this. So I'm of two minds, right? Like, I guess there's two different strategies or ways that people talk about this. One is, take massive action, which I'm a huge fan of, like really, really put all of your effort towards what it is that you want to accomplish. And almost assuredly, as long as you're doing check-ins and you're making sure that your efforts are done are checked, right? Like your strategies are checked. So I like to use in this sphere, when I'm having this part of the conversation, we're talking about taking massive action. I think that they can make huge changes in your life in a positive way, so long as you are actually paying attention to what those actions are producing, right? It's not enough to be able to like put your head down and take massive action and then to lift your head up and be like, I mean, if you're going to do that, make sure you at least pop your head back up occasionally, quarterly, to see what the lay of the land is. Like, picture like a groundhog or a mole or something, like burrowing himself underground, closing its eyes and just digging for 3 months. And then, do you as that mole lift your head up out of the ground and like look around and see like, oh, what's going on? Oh, wow, this is not the direction I meant to go. Let me reassess and readjust and recalibrate my compass here and go the direction that I want to go. Right, and so that's a way, and that's not necessarily a bad way, and that is indicative of putting all of your effort into that, right? Because all of that effort is going into digging in that direction, right? And so now you can go into all the different types of strategies of digging. Is he scratching up and down? Is he going left and right? And all of that is analogous to the actions that you're actually taking to move a direction in your personal life, whether it be in your relationships, in your professional life, in your fitness, in your mental health, all of these different things. And so yeah, that's kind of like the taking massive action. And I think that can be highly beneficial if you're so long as you're actually, sticking your head up on occasion to figure out what the hell's going on. And it's really hard to know what the heck is going on if you don't know where you want to go. It's hard. Imagine, again, being this groundhog or whatever, and digging and plowing your way forward and sticking your head up and looking around. And so you look up and you look around and you see like you're surrounded by woods and forest and And you're like, okay, well, I see the woods and I see the trees, and I'm taking I'm paying really careful attention to all of these things that I see around me. And I'm acknowledging what's there. But if you don't know where you want to go, then none of that matters. Like you can take the best notes and you can work your butt off. But if you don't know what you're working towards, then it's very hard to do those check-ins. It makes those, when you stick your head up out of the ground, you look around like, yep, I see the trees, I see the grass, there's some deer over there, I see a running creek, we got water, it looks like it rained here a couple days ago. All right, I've got a bunch of detail. I'm understanding the scenario around me, but I didn't really have a good... I knew I didn't want to be where I was, and so I know I'm not there anymore, because there were no trees and no animals, and it was hot. And this is better, but I don't really have an idea of where I wanted to go. And that leads you to a potential for settling once again. Like you're in a scenario where you're in a place that, it's like if you leave your job to go take another job somewhere else, and you're just accepting the first job that offers a salary that matches or is above where you're at, and you're like, finally, I'm leaving this despot, of whatever terrorist leadership that I'm under, and I'm finally leaving and I'm going somewhere else, and I'm even now I know that I at least for the groundhog, he knew he wanted to get out of the sun, right? And for you, you're like, oh, I needed to be able to keep the same pay, or I needed to get paid a little bit more, and so then you go, but then you actually look around and you're like, oh, I'm just okay. Well, this isn't really like get me going, doesn't really fire me up, but it's not the hell that I was in before. All right, well, okay, we'll just see what we can make up here. It's different than when you have a very clear idea of where you want to go. Like, I want to work for a company that does X, Y, and Z, that really takes care of their employees, because they see that as the key to a successful business, and not just selling more and more and more. It's all about, compassion and care, if that's your thought process, and then if you don't have a clear idea of those kind of priorities and your values, then it's going to be very hard for you not to be swept away in the moment by whatever comes up, by whatever the world happens to throw at you. It's very important for you to understand kind of like who you are and what you want and what your goals are. And it's very easy to go through life having this vague idea in your mind of what those things are. I feel like a lot of people know or feel like they know. If you ask them, like, do you know what you want? Like, do you know what matters to you in a job? I feel like a lot of people would be like, yeah, man, or like, do you have priorities when it comes to work? Like, to selecting, if you had two places that offered, that had the same exact work you would be doing and offered you the same exact pay, how would you make the decision of how to go there? I don't know that people would be ready necessarily to answer that question. They might have some placated or cliche kind of this, they take care of their people, vacation days, if you take all of that and you're like, okay, well, you earn, like in the military, you earn 2.5 days a month of leave. So you make all things equal like that. And you get down to the nitty gritty and get past all of that HR kind of stuff. Make all things equal. What really matters. And it's an interesting kind of thought experiment to have with someone, to have with people. So it's something I invite you to do with yourself, because it can really help to guide your future. It can help to guide your own understanding of yourself. So whether or not you're comfortable or not, if you're stressed out and not happy or content in your current state of employee, in your current relationships, in your current fitness, your current life, this is a type of thought experiment that I encourage you to do. Is to make all things kind of external or extraneous and those things equal, and figure out what's important to you. What do you value? You can say, oh, I value time off. Okay, well, why do you value time off? What do you do in your time off? Like, what's valuable about that? Is it just you don't don't care what you do in your time off. You just need to not be at work a certain amount of days, so that way you can be rejuvenated for when you go back into work, because that matters to you, being able to perform while you're there. Okay, well, and if that's the case, then how do you get rejuvenated? Like, do you require more sleep on your days off? Does that mean that you would actually prefer to just have your schedule adjusted during the working week, so that you're able to work on a more flexible schedule and get more sleep? All of these types of things. Is it important for you to go out and to embrace nature? Do you enjoy going out to very large events that are going to start happening again? At least here, and being around people, is that how you charge up your battery? It's important to understand how that battery gets charged up. And so that's, I encourage you to help figure that out. But all of that, like I said, all of that's towards like, on this kind of massive action side. And I think that that's important, but I think that it's not necessarily sustainable. I think it's a really good model for launching something. Like, if you're going to launch a business, if you're working for another company and you're getting ready to start a project to do that, if you're starting a relationship with somebody, if you're going into working out, perhaps, I don't think that this is necessarily a good model there. I think the other half of this is a better model. And that's focusing on structure, right? And and again, the baseline of all of this is really focusing on yourself, focusing on understanding yourself first. And so you need to understand when you operate the best. I remember I was taking this neuroscience class at George Mason University, and they were talking, they had you take a survey that was to determine if you were, I think it's a lark or a night owl. Larks are like I think they're gotta be birds. Pretty sure it's a bird that gets up and operates like super early, and does all of its like best work first thing in the morning. It's a very, very early rising bird, like the earliest rising bird, or something like that. And then you have your night owls, right? The owls that stay up, that operate at night, and that's when they do their hunting. That's when they operate. That's when they're up and doing their thing. And so and it was cool because it's not like those. It didn't feel like a social media survey, It was a bit more scientific than that, and it was cool because there were grades. There were grades to it, so it wasn't like you're a lark or you're a night owl. It's like you are this degree of in between. And I aired. If there were, I want to say there were like 4 degrees of lark and 4 degrees of night owl, and they kind of overlap, right? So there's like 2. It's like you're mostly lark and somewhat night owl and whatever. And I was like the 2nd or 3rd degree lark. Like I wasn't like full on lark, but I was like pretty close. I was like the next one down to in between the next one down and the 3rd. We'll call it 3rd. Lark 3. So yeah, no, but it was interesting, and it kind of reaffirmed, and especially at that time for me, because I was getting up on my own. That was such a hard time. It was very stressful. It was very demanding, because that was the time when I was doing the show. I was doing 3 classes at George Mason, one of which was calc. That was really the biggest thing, because I was taking history, neuroscience, and calculus, and calculus was just eating up all of my time. I was so not good at calculus that it really required a lot of attention, a lot of focus for me to do well. I ended up getting like a very high A in the class, but it required all of that work to do it, like very high levels of attention and focus and effort to do that. Whereas neuroscience required like medium to low amounts of work, because it was reading, understanding reports, and it was an entry-level class. It was 101, and then there was a history class. It was another entry-level U.S. history, I think it was, leading up to from the founding, or from the very first Europeans coming over to, so it didn't hit like the Native American time period. It was European colonization to Civil War. Should have been the time frame. So, and those are so easy. So, and the history class was so not demanding. It was like, watch this lecture, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it was heavily demanding, and it was very stressful because I was, like I said, I was taking those 3 classes, and the calculus really kicked my butt. I was doing the show, I was building training programs, and I was working part-time for this company in a sales position, which I am still currently doing. Really, the only thing that's changed in the schedule is I'm not taking classes right now. And now I'm getting ready to start doing that again. So that's super exciting. But anyway, but yeah, so we're talking about like being a lark, right? And so that's when I figured out that I was a lark, and it made sense because I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and like needing to work, like get to work by 5:20, and not like leave, but like dig in. And so I would start doing. And that was when I was doing my best at like gratitude journaling, and I really got on to a pretty hard schedule. I get up, drink coffee. While I'm drinking my coffee, I'm doing gratitude journaling and future projecting and kind of like doing some creative stuff. And then I tried doing calculus in the morning, and it just didn't go very well. Like I was doing it, but it was tough. Like I kept being drawn to the training and the show and the business side of things, or even neuroscience and looking up and writing a bit on the papers. And I was in a more thought-provoking, contemplative space in the morning, ready to work, but not ready to like dig into math. It wasn't the most productive use of my time. Now, I noticed that after lunch, with, you know, in the early afternoon, and this is really dependent on the fact that like I enjoy intermittent fasting, which is something else that I discovered through experimentation, right? All of this is going back to the idea of structure, right? And so like discovering that I was a lark made sense, and it aligned with the way that I was kind of looking at my life. It was just like a reaffirmation or an affirmation of what I was actually experiencing. So it was really no surprise. But so the way that I structured it, you know, like I said, I get up at 5, I'd make my coffee, enjoy it, do my journaling, and future casting and stuff like that. And then by 5:20, pretty diligently at work. And like I said, try to do math, but it didn't fit. And so I had to like rejigger these puzzle pieces in such a way that it was most productive. And it took plugging and playing and trying and experimenting and some, eventually, you know, I found what did work. And it was something to the effect of doing more creative things in the morning, and then doing more clerical. It wasn't like my brain wasn't ready to work in the afternoon, and a big part of that was like I never have those afternoon slumps, that after lunch slump, because I typically don't eat lunch, or I won't eat until later, and when I do eat, it'll end up being lighter of a lunch, versus like what I would used to have for most of my life, real heavy lunch, leftovers from dinner or whatever, and a huge heaping load that just puts me down. Or go out and get burgers with the guys at work, and you know, and eat lunch hour, or get a Philly, you know, covered in cheese and all this stuff, and just put you on your butt, you know, and fries and all the greasy stuff. It was just knocking delicious. Don't get me wrong, I love it. It's glorious, but it puts me on my butt, man. Like just straight puts me on my butt, and it makes it so I'm not very useful in the afternoons, and that's not the case anymore. But there's an important distinction between the type of work that I'm doing and when I'm doing it in order to be the most productive, to elicit the best performance. And so to me, then again, that goes back to structure. And the structure, you need to structure your day to the best of your ability, and that you have control over it in such a way that is conducive to the way that you operate. Because just because I operate that way, it doesn't mean that you operate that way. Like, it's something that you have to plug and play and figure out. And if you've paid attention to yourself, you can kind of start to, you know, make some deductions and figure out like, okay, well, I tend to do well when I'm doing these kinds of things in the morning, or I don't really get going. My mind doesn't really click on until like 10:30. And so like, what can I do that's a little bit more mindless during those times when my brain is still catching up with the day? Or I do my best work at night, you know, late at night. And so you got to understand and then you got to build that structure around it. But one of the things that I really love doing, and it has been crucial for me in like opening up my mind, like working on my fitness, working on my mental health, and working on my creativity, have been walks. And so I really love, I've gotten a really good habit or structured 2 walks a day, like during a typical standard work day. And really it was like Monday through Friday. I've got, as long as nothing comes in and screws this up, I've gotten pretty good. And it's all about my dogs, right? And so I got 2 Newfoundlands, Moose and Harper, absolutely beautiful pups. And they love going out for these walks. And it's like, we don't go for very far. It's getting hot now in Virginia. They're double coated, and they don't want to walk for that long. But I take them out. It's probably about a mile, maybe. Yeah, because we're walking for like 20 minutes, and it might be more. It might be like a mile and a quarter, something like that. The distance doesn't really matter. It's the fact that I'm getting out there now. Clouds are parted, the sun's pouring down, I'm feeling it. Some days I'll have my headphones on, my Bluetooth bone conduction headphones on, so I can hear the world around me. They're not actually plugged into my ears. For a product review, I don't have them with me. I typically always do. But I have the blue ones. They're like Aeropex Aftershocks bone conduction headphones. If you look that up, something like that, if you look at bone conduction headphones, you'll start to see them. They wrap. It's like a band that goes around the back of your head, and they wraps over your ears, so it kind of sits over the top of your ears. And then it's got the speakers sit on your like temple bones, and then the vibration from those actually makes it so it's just like you're listening through your ears, like exactly as crystal clear. For anybody that's a runner or likes to walk, or even if you're just like going around the house and you're not wanting to like blare music if other people are around, but you're wanting to listen to something like books and stuff, that's what I like to do. Then these are great, and I don't like have something in my ears all day. Like this is great for over the top, especially here because it keeps me engaged. But then if I'm around, especially if I'm going out for walks, I love those because then your ears are open too, so you're also receiving all of the external output. So it's a safety thing. So I hear, if I'm going for a run or I'm taking the dogs for a walk, I can hear everything that's going on. And even if somebody's coming up and like they want to talk, because now with the dogs, everybody wants to talk. I can do that, and I can do that with the headphones on, and I don't have to like pull them out or anything. I can hit pause real quick, and I don't have to make any other adjustments. So that's like the one plug for the episode. And no, I'm not a freaking, what do you call it, affiliate. There's no affiliate here. I just highly recommend it because I used it, and I've played around with a bunch. I used Cheetah and some other ones, and these Aftershocks are the best ones that I've ever had. So highly recommended. Check them out. Let's see. So anyway, yeah, back to the walk, right? So, the walk has been huge, right? Because it gets my blood pumping. It gets me moving. I feel better about it. I don't care what people say. I love counting my steps. I took the dogs for a walk today, and I went for a run. I'm at 18,517 steps. Thank you very much. And I love it. I think it's a great thing. I have the thing that's like, hey, man, it's been like 45 minutes since you got up. You should probably get up and go walk, especially being a person that works behind a computer, creating content, working on sales with the other company, writing papers, helping, and just all this stuff. I find that very helpful as a way, like, okay, cool, I have been here for a while. Let me get up and just stretch. Get up and do like a 2.5 minute stretch and just kind of walk around real quick, shake it off. And I think that really helps. I think it helps to get my eyes off of the screens too. I think that's huge. And so for that kind of specific physical, biological health. But then there's the mental health aspect of actually going outside, breathing the fresh air, seeing the trees, seeing the patterns, and seeing other people and engaging with them, with their dogs, and that are just walking by. I love seeing like some of the elderly people that live in our neighborhood, and they'll be like in their garages or doing work, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And they're so happy to engage, and it's cool, man. I love that stuff. I love seeing the people. Like it's weird. When I think about it, like almost everyone that knows me would probably call me an extrovert, but I think that I'm not that. I think I'm a very socially adept introvert. Like I love talking with people. I love meeting people. It really fires me up, but like there's a limit to it, and I do, if I'm not around people that I know, if it's meeting kind of new people and generating conversation, I love it, but it's also draining, right? So it's not like, if you use that type of definition to describe introverts and extroverts, like being around other people energizes you, being around my friends and people that I'm close to where I can have deep and meaningful conversations and thoughtful conversations, that energizes me. Being around people I don't know and generating conversations and being like, because a lot of people just aren't good at conversing, and so like being the lead there, that's draining. That's very draining for me. But I still do enjoy it, but it does. I have a limit in that, and it's not very high. So I can do it for a little bit. So I'm good for a couple of minutes. Like if people come and see the dogs, I'm good for a couple of minutes of chit chat. I don't find a lot of joy in that necessarily, and I'm ready to move on. And so anyway, that kind of leads me directly into the idea for today's episode, because I haven't actually gotten there yet. All of that is it using that structure creates these scenarios that are beneficial to me, and these walks really help me to be receptive to the world around me and to pay attention. So like I said, sometimes I'm listening, I'm getting ideas from other people that I'm listening to through audiobooks. Sometimes I'll be listening to interviews. Sometimes I won't listen to anything at all. That's actually become more frequent during these walks. I want to give my brain time to be on its own, right? To not be getting the external stimulus. And so these walks have been great for it, because I'm still getting the external stimulus. I'm just not getting other people's ideas. It's just me. And then I was on this walk. It was about a week ago, maybe a little bit more than a week ago, because I'd mentioned it in last week's episode. If you didn't check it, check that one out. That was where I talked a bit about masks. That was like one of the first episodes that it was like I hit pretty heavy on some current events, which we don't typically do. So if you're interested in that, go check out last week's episode. But yeah, so I was on a walk, and this is really interesting. I don't remember what was happening. I do not, for the life of me, I cannot recall the context of this, but I do recall the event in specific detail. Like, I went for the walk, and I remember thinking, I was like, I just want to walk. Like, I even thought about changing my walking route, because I've walked this route for as long as I have now, which honestly has just been like a couple of months, if that. But now that I've done it, like, people on the route know me, and they know the dogs. And because I'm good at striking up chit chat, and the dogs are relatively well behaved for being puppies, they're pretty good. And so, like, when I go out, I know that there's specific spots that, like, people are almost always going to be at. Like, these people are always outside. Those people are always outside. That guy's usually walking his dog. If they see me, they're going to come up. And most people see me, they're going to come up. And so I remember going and walking, and then there was this first family that's usually there. They got a couple of dogs, and I'm like, and I just, usually I'll stop and I'll let them pet them, and we'll hang out and talk, and we'll talk about how cute the dogs are, because they're like little kids, and move on. And I didn't. I was like, I'm not in the mood. I need to walk. The dogs need to go for a walk, and it wasn't like an obligation. It was like, I really want to walk. I was like, I just don't want to. I was hitting a real hard introverted moment where, like, I'm not interested in other humans. I just want to do the walk. So I go out, and naturally it was like there were 10 times as many people out. Everybody wanted to come up. And I just, like I said, I was not feeling it. And so I walked right past the first family, and they walked in, they're like kind of looking, and they like look at me, and they feel my body language. Even the kids. That's what's so interesting. Even the children were like picking up my body language. Like, oh, okay, we're not going to go. And so whatever, we'll keep playing. So I keep going, and then there's a family that's typically not out that I've never seen. It's 3 small kids, and they go up like, oh my God, the dog's so cute. And they come like kind of running over, and I just keep walking. I'm like, I'm not playing. Like, I'm good. We're going to keep going. And they stopped, and I hear them talking about, oh, I wish I could have petted the dog. I think they said that what happened from another kids later on. Though they said something, they're like, oh, they look so fluffy. Oh, yep. And yeah, that's what that was. And then I kept going, and I saw more people. And I remember I had this moment, and it was the way that those kids. It was the way that that those kids responded to it, where they like, I saw them, they like kind of got excited, and they kind of came like trotting over, and I never made eye contact. I never looked. I just saw them out of my peripheral vision and just kind of kept walking. And they kind of stopped and turned around and walked away, and they would go, and it was at that moment, it was probably not at that moment, but that spurred the thought. It was probably, so I walked for maybe another, like down that block, hung a right, halfway up the next block, and I had the moment, I was like, I totally changed the energy in that yard. And now, I probably didn't change the energy of the kids playing in that yard for more than 10, 15 seconds. Like, they probably like saw dogs, got excited. I didn't give them the opportunity to engage and embrace that excitement and see it into real life and fulfillment with playing with the dogs. And then they got sad. And then they walked back. And then they probably started playing again, and never thought about it again. But but it did change everything, because it stopped the flow of their game, and it inserted this possibility of an opportunity of something fun and exciting to do, and then it was like shut down. And so this was like it was something that even subconsciously might be held onto for a long time. But I don't even really, like, the long-term impacts are kind of whatever, but it's the thing that I've really thought about. I was like, man, my personal stuff rubbed off on them. And even if it rubbed off on them for all of 15 seconds, then it never matters to them again. They never think about it again. It doesn't like create some long lasting impression that like, oh, yep, strangers aren't very nice with their dogs and whatever. Even if it doesn't do any of that, it did for that like 15 seconds. And I thought, I was like, man, I didn't do anything. Like it was my not doing anything that was doing something, right? It was my commitment to not do anything that created the reaction. It was my complete lack of engagement, complete non-engagement, that didn't look at them, didn't communicate with them, and just kept moving, and it created this kind of negative event. And it made me think, I was like, man, that's really interesting. And it's not really a phenomenon, but it's something I think that's very important to be aware of. And that's the contagious nature of our emotions, of our mindsets. I'm a huge fan, proponent, believer in that you attract the kind of people that you kind of act like, right? Like, if you're a positive and outgoing person, then you're going to attract positive and outgoing people. Like that negative person does not want to, is not going to want to spend time around you if they're innately negative, unless they're open to influence, right? Unless you catch them in an influential way. So I pulled up this emotional contagion, and I don't have it cited, which is, of course, I'm such a bum. but it was a relatively quick Google search. If you look up emotional contagion, I'm sure that you'll see it. But I just wanted to read this off real quick to give you an idea of what we're talking about. And it is the phenomenon of having one person's emotions and related behaviors directly trigger similar emotions and behaviors in other people. When people unconsciously mirror their companion's expression of emotion, they come to feel reflections of those companions' emotions. And so that's really interesting. And it's so natural for us that it's not really that much of a phenomenon, just because we accept it, because it's so normal, because it's so obvious to us that why, like, it's kind of like, duh, like, of course, when you're around, if you're in a group of people that are crying, it's weird to be the one that's laughing. It's weird to start laughing. It's out of context. It doesn't make sense. And it can actually be very helpful to jolt people. Like, think about, like, at a funeral or whatever, somebody cracks a well-timed, well-placed joke in good taste. It can help a lot. But if someone is talking to you about an experience and they're crying about it, it's very common to see the respondent, the listener, if they're really engaged, if they're really present, to get a little bit emotional as well, to get teary-eyed. What do they call it? Sympathetic cry or sympathetic tears or something like that. And the same holds true for positive emotions. If you're really excited about something, your excitement and your body language and the way you're engaging with people can raise the energy of the room, and that's a lot of influence. It's a lot of when you understand how to leverage that in a particular way, then those are tools of influence. I think that's really cool. It's really important. It's really important for all of us, because we're all agents of influence. We're constantly either being influenced or we're influencing. It's kind of the natural state of our existence, because when you think about it, it's, if you want to go out to eat at a certain place, you're trying to influence your significant other to go there. And so you'll present it in a way, if you're really motivated, you'll present it in a way that is the best. You remind them of a good time. You remind them of how much they enjoyed the meal when they were there before, and how close and convenient it is, or whatever positive things. And if you're really good, you'll think about their specific experience and how they had a really positive. So you won't be like, oh, remember the food was so good, and they're like, no, I didn't really enjoy it. You liked it, but I didn't really like my meal. And you're like, oh yeah, but remember, you tried mine. What if you ordered something that was similar to my food? Because you tried mine and you really liked that too, and we can try something else new. And you can use that if you know that your partner is, like, really curious and interested, is generally curious, and open and wanting to explore, has that kind of non-habitual mindset. Then you can use that as well, and it's all of these kind of tools of the trade. But all of this came around, like I was talking about, came about from the walk, and came about from this reality, this real life application of this emotional contagion. Was that emotional contagion? That's what it was. Yeah, I think probably. Is that what I said? Yeah, emotional contagion. Because when I thought about it, I was like, oh man, I like infected those people. Like, I infected those kids, and it didn't change. Like, I was still a sour pants afterwards for the remainder of it. Anyone else that I walked into too, and I was like, man, like the way. But then I was like watching myself. Then it turned almost into an experiment. I was still being emotionally lazy and not being willing to engage with people. But then it turned into like I said, like observing what was actually happening as well. Because it was so interesting to watch how the way that I engaged with the world changed the world around me, and doing it in a negative way was so interesting, because I watched this mind virus, this mental contagion, this emotional contagion leave me and infect other people and like zap them. And it's like being able to watch what happens with a cold, but happen on a very like an expedited timeline. So you get a cold, takes a little bit to develop. You have it for a couple of days, you start getting better, you get on the mend, and then you're all good. This emotional contagions, because of the way that our brains are so open and receptive to one another, because of what we are, because we're human, we are so much more receptive and susceptible to emotional contagions than we are physical contagions. It's because of like our social status and how much that matters, and like being able to read people and what their intentions are, and that's so important for us and our survivability, and that was historically for our development, our evolution over time. That we look at the way that we live now, and it's hard for us to imagine. Like, we know that we live differently, and it's important for us to acknowledge that we lived significantly differently for like 99% of the time that humans have been around. It's very, very, very short period of time that we've started living the way that we're living now. It is. And so we have these old, very useful structures, biological and neurological and mental structures and facilities that work for us and have worked for us, but are not. They continue to work how they work, but they do it now in our modern society, which is very different. Because we are so far, many of us, most of us are so far removed from survivability, right? Like when people die, it's like early. When people die young, it's like, whoa, that's crazy. I can't believe that person got in a car accident and died. I can't believe that person got cancer. Like it's an anomaly. It's weird. Like, it happens a lot, but before, it's like that happens all the time. And so babies dying all the time. So you gotta have a lot of babies. Yeah. And so but it's interesting because when you think about the emotional contagion part of it, it's like we're just so susceptible to it. Like, you can infect somebody with that immediately and completely change their day. And I've talked about it before on the opposite end of being positive and having, like, I remember I told a story and I was riding back on my motorcycle, riding through the neighborhood, and there was a lady walking. I think she was with her dog. And I like looked over and I leaned over and I was like, "Hey, puppy!" Like, obviously he couldn't hear me. I was on a motorcycle, but I kind of waved a little bit to the puppy, and I looked up and I smiled at the lady. And we're only like, 15 feet apart, because she's on the sidewalk. I'm right there on the road. It's a small road, relatively, and right in our neighborhood. And so she sees me. She sees the interaction. Like, my face isn't covered. It's a 3/4 helmet. And I have like the protective sunglasses on, but yeah, so she sees me and she's like, oh, so I looked up at her and I smiled too. And she smiles. She's like, oh my gosh, hi, that's so cool. And it's cool. Somebody's on a bike and they like waved and they like engaged with me. It's cool. It's a novelty experience for people. And I love it. I love being on, that either side of it. It's very fun. But it's fun because in the same way that when I walk by and I see the elderly people there and I engage, I'm like, hey, how you doing? Then that's that positive side of it. And I see the other people walking. Like, I talked about, I think it was last week when I had walked by and there was a dude that we always walk by. He's this little Yorkie named Snickers and his name's Sean. And I remember like walking by or running, and he was walking perpendicular and away from me, so he didn't see me, but I looked over and I saw him when I was running, and I just hollered, Sean, and then he like literally jumped and turned around, and I was like, hey, and he was like, hey, and so it was just, but that positive like injection, like that changed him too. And so like we have the ability to infect people, and it was just, I've seen it, and I try to do that somewhat regularly. in a positive way, and it was interesting to watch it unfold in a negative way, and to like watch that infection take place, process, and leave people. It's very powerful. It's something very crucial to be aware of, that the way that you carry yourself, even when you're not in your best state, like whatever state you're in, when you're around other people, like that state is going to rub off on them. Like it might even be just a little bit, but it's like you will, and you are kind of always infecting those around you with your mentality. And so it's something to be aware of, and something to think about, especially when it comes to your ability to influence and to make change. Like you can use that to your advantage when you think about, if you want to, if you pay attention to the people that are around you and the people that gravitate to you, like what are we talking about? What are our commonalities? And that was actually an interesting additional follow-up to this, because it was so we went back in like the 80s or 90s, there was a study that basically said, they took people and they had them, if I understand the study correctly, they had people go and take an assessment and give like an emotional response, or a kind of a judgment or a thought about these different people in these different roles. So they'd like bring up like a person that's like a chef, or bring up this person that's like a doctor, or a person that's like a clerk at a bank, and people would like respond and say like what they thought about that person. And so then they would take like pictures of these people with their comments, and they'd put those up in front of the second group of people that would basically be judging these judgers. So these people would like judging these other employed folk, I guess, if you will. And then they would have people judging those people that were judging them based off the types of reviews that they left for these people. And by and large, everyone's like, oh yeah, no, we favor the people that were kinder in their judgments, that had kind words to say. And those people that were like judgmental towards these people, we look upon them with poor favor. I don't like them, kind of a thing. And so it's like, well, duh. Right? Like, of course, that's what you'd say. But the interesting part is that this was kind of revisited and redone, because there was something that was done that was like missing. And the missing piece is that those people, the judgers who were judging the second set of judges, we'll call them the watchman who watches the watchman, the watchers of the judges, those people were not in a scenario where it was even a remote possibility to establish a relationship with these people, with those first set of judgers, the people who judged the chef, positive or negatively. Because it's interesting that they did a new study. They did like 3 different sub-studies within it, like 2 studies of surveys and then like an experiment. So there's an interesting shift when we think about negativity, right? So like our gut instinct is to think, like with this study, that if you're negative, we don't want to really be around you. We don't want to be around negative people. And what it turns out in actuality, it's not true. It's actually quite the opposite. So, but given certain particular circumstances. So, if you are in a group, if you're in a place where there is some sort of a common alignment, some common beliefs, some common core values, a common purpose, then that will break down into subgroups. Like, obviously, depending on how many people that are there. But it can happen very quickly, and with not a lot of people. Like, you hear this, I forget what it's called, but the 150 number of people where like community will break down from there. Like Gore-Tex is a company that acknowledged this kind of number, and they're like I know Gore-Tex from being in the military, and like we had Gore-Tex outdoor equipment. It was like the rain. we would call, hey, grab your Gore-Tex. Like, it would be like a noun, not a brand. So like Gore-Tex would be like your, like a rain protected gear and equipment, stuff like that. And also insulated winter stuff as well. So, but Gore-Tex set up, their working offices environment in such a way that was aligned with that, and with some like they didn't use like titles for their positions. There's a bunch of stuff. I think I remember learning that in a Malcolm Gladwell book. I think it wasn't Outliers. It may have been Blink. No, it wasn't Blink. Gosh, which one was it? I don't freaking remember. He's got so many good books. So just read them all. This is a second plug for the episode. Read all Malcolm Gladwell books. But anyway, it happens. These sub-tribes, these breakdowns actually happen much smaller. And if you've worked around people, then you know it. Like, I know that this is true from a personal experience, but just to follow through with the idea, before I give you my personal example, and I know that this works, is that negativity actually fosters, creates, and bonds people together, and fosters new relationships with people within those groups. It's kind of like it's almost like a calling card. And so when I was reading about the study, they referenced like politics. Like if you're in a political group, like say like you're a Democrat and you're hanging out with other Democrats, just because you're a Democrat and you're hanging out with other Democrats doesn't mean that you all like all. It's not like every person who's like hanging out together, like going out to the bar and catching a drink or whatever. It's not like all of you like or appreciate all Democratic politicians to the same level or the same degree. And so calling out one and hating on one is where negativity can actually turn into a relationship building tool. And it serves that way for many different reasons, because there is it's like a calling card. It's like, this is what I believe. Who believes this further with me? Who's willing to go on this bus, this train, not just to the Democratic station, but to the next station of not liking this person? Like, why don't you like him? I didn't even think about not liking him because of those reasons. I don't like him because of these reasons. Like, I didn't think about. And then you guys are like bonding over this mutual disgust for this. Not necessarily. It doesn't even have to be disgust. This distaste for this person. So it actually bonds, and I'm sure that all of you right now are like, yeah, totally. I know exactly what you're talking about. But for those of you that don't, I actually used this tool way before I knew anything about anything. I just knew people. Like, I understood very early on establishing relationships, and I remember the first time I consciously used this as an influence tactic. I was 18 years old, and I was working at a Firestone. I was either 17 or 18. No, I had to be 18 because I was working at a Firestone, and I was going to Universal Technical Institute in Avondale, Arizona. Me and my brother were living together, and we were still living together at that point. Again, doesn't matter. So, completely irrelevant to the story, but. So we're both working there as a part-time gig to, put food on the table while we're going to school. And there was this guy, Eddie. Eddie was there, and Eddie's just the stereotype. He wasn't a mechanic. He worked in the front. He was a service advisor. Worked with the customers, filled out the tickets, stuff like that. And he had like the perfect like gut, like to hold plates and drinks on, like it was disgusting. But it was Eddie, and he was just kind of like a scoundrel. He was just like, he had a mustache and like a thinned out straight hair, and just like, I don't know, everything about him turned me off. And he was he wasn't like underhanded at all. Like, I never caught that, and I was too young, and I never really went to the front to bother with all that. I was just like, give me the tickets, I'll work on the cars. But we had a hard time getting along. I didn't like him, he didn't like me. But I remember I was like, something happened, and I was like, I'm going to try to foster this relationship, because I'm sick of dealing with like this stress of us not connecting at work. I'm sick of it. Like, it is very tiring. So I wanted to change it, and so I did. And so I did that through hating on like customers that were bringing their cars in, because he would always like talk smack. And so and I acknowledged that he was always talking smack on these customers for like these different odds and ends reasons, whatever, like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and he comes up and like, so I made some comment about the car, like, oh my gosh, yeah, you can tell this guy was stupid, because X, Y, and Z, whatever, and it worked. It was crazy. Like, I watched it, like, immediately he was like, oh yeah, no, I was talking to him up front. He's, oh my gosh, I couldn't freaking stand this guy, and blah 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 blah. I was like, oh god, I knew it because this I saw in the car or whatever, and like he was talking about this complaint, like, and it's just ridiculous. And so I don't even remember specifically what it was about or how I did. I just remember like bonding over a shared animosity towards another person, and I was like, wow, that's a very interesting thing. But it's and then it's proved out like in the scientific studies that study was done, if you guys want to check it out, it was by the University of Oklahoma in tandem with the University of Texas in Austin. And so that's really cool. It's something I want to dive in a little bit further into, but I thought it was really interesting. And it's just, so it's one of those things where like there is no good or bad. It's everything's a freaking tightrope, man. Like, so you're like, oh, you shouldn't be negative. That's negativity is bad. You're going to draw negative people towards you. Like, yeah, well, sometimes it helps you to identify who's on your team and who's not on your team. It helps to serve as a calling card. If you use it right and you sprinkle it right and you don't make that the basis of your relationship and you ensure that you stay true to who you are. Like, you're not falsely saying disrespectful things, and you're not being disrespectful for disrespectful's sake. Like, if you're like, I don't like this guy because he said X, Y, and Z, or he does these actions, or she's stated that she believes these things, and I don't agree with those things, then like, that's cool, right? You're not being disrespectful. Like, I don't like them. Like, I would never vote for that person. Like, going back to the political stuff, I'd never vote for her. She believes this. This is. I don't like her flavor of politics, of republicanism, of conservatism, of Democrat. Whatever. And people are like, yeah, no, I totally agree, and you can form that bond that way. But then it's up to you to not let that be the well that you guys always go back to. That's the tightrope, right? We're not like, oh, well, every time I need this, we're like, oh, who are we talking smack on now? Like, if you guys have seen the show Community, oh god, I love this show. It was really good in the beginning and started going off the rails towards the end. But Jeff Winger was like the main character, and I don't remember the guy that plays him. He actually did, it was so weird. He did an interview. I had a full beer. It was so weird to see him like that. But he did an interview with one of the guys from Tiger King. That was the name of that show, right? That documentary. He did an interview with one of the guys afterwards. I was like, oh my god, that's Jeff Winger. But I digress. So, but him and this lady, Cheryl, I think Sherry, I forget her name on the show. I think it was Cheryl. She's like this little short, kind of plump black woman, who's like kind of plays like the mom of this group ish, if you will. And they end up finding him and Jeff Winger is the character who's like this handsome guy who used to be an attorney. Now he's got to go to this community college, and that's where like all of this random ensemble of individuals are going to this community college together. And then they're in this quote unquote study group where they never study, and they just get into shenanigans. It's a fun 20-minute like per episode mindless endeavor for you to just get out of your own head. It's enjoyable, but I bring it up because they bonded. They ended up finding a way to bond over like just talking crap on people. And so they would just see random people and they would just be talking mad crap. And it's like how they formed this relationship. And it was so cool just to see it play out, like see a show do that where they identified the reality of that and they let it play out, but then they have it run like way too far where they're like, dude, we have to stop. This is not healthy. Like they end up doing it to like one of the group's friends, like boyfriends or something, and it ruins their relationship. And it's just like, it's pretty funny. It's good, but it's so real. It's so true. And it's just, like I said, I love the chance that we get to look at things a little bit more nuanced, where we could come out and just say, negativity is bad. Don't be negative. Like, you're going to attract those people into your life. And it's like, well, no, that's a tightrope, man. Like, there are positives to a little bit of negativity. Like, you got to have an opinion. You got to know what you stand for. You got to know what you don't stand for. And in your act of standing opposed to certain things and being quote unquote negative about it, you're putting out your calling card. You're putting out your bat signal. Like, this is what I believe. And that actually attracts people to you. And that's important, because then the more like-minded people that you have around you, the more likely you guys are to lift each other up. If you are in the business of lifting yourself up, if you're taking actions towards that, then you're able to throw out these bat signals for what you stand for, and you integrate this all together. Then you have like-minded people that are lifting each other up. And through that, we can change our own lives individually and change our lives as the people around us and our groups and communities. And that's how culture changes. That's how politics eventually change. And that's how the world shifts. And so that's our goal here, man, is start with you, start with us, start with the way that we perceive our own minds, our own roles, our own positions in the world, and figure out where do we want to be? How do we get there? How do we maintain that position once we get there? How do we live a better life than we ever thought was possible? It all starts here. And that's what we talk about here. And so if you're new, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out and spending time with us today. It really does mean a lot. And all I ask of, I will come here and we will do this. All I ask is just please just like and subscribe. That's it. That's the only ask. And if you're really if you're a return member and you're already subscribed, you're already one of the crew, then just share. Find one person, find one friend, and send a link to them in a private message. Just like, hey, I thought that this was pretty cool. Check it out. Let me know what you think. And that's it. No skin off your back, no skin off mine, and that is a huge. That is like the single biggest thing that we can do to grow this show and to spread the word. And so if you think that it's worthy, if you're getting value from it and it's worth spreading the word of the show, then please do that. That would mean the absolute world to me. And if you do that, I will be here again next week for another episode with you on The Matt LaStalia Show.